everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Fluent Friday. This is your Facebook Live session with me, Kerstin Kershul, and just in case you're completely lost and you just logged in for no reason, I run the website fluentlanguage.co.uk, where I help people learn a language by themselves. And today, due to popular demand, it's a personal video. So I am here, I've got my props and I've got some evidence. Oh, I don't know. I've got some information and sort of signs of what I use to learn a language. Sorry, I just spotted like this massive wasp just over there. So if it comes and attacks me, you'll find out. But first of all, thank you so much if you're tuning in live, and hello, and it's wonderful to see you guys. At any point during the video, please just leave a comment down there and I should be able to see them live. So I'll see my viewers when they join my video, and I'll see your comments as well and your questions. I would love to take questions. Really, you can ask me anything. It's my mission to help you learn languages better and have more fun when you're learning languages, and that is what we're here for. So today, my language story, because it's often easy to look at foreign language speakers, or God forbid, go on YouTube and watch these people who are demonstrating their expertise in several foreign languages, and easy to feel inferior, cynical, or like for some reason this means that you can't do this, you can't learn languages. And I want to kind of tell you how I came to speak English the way I do. Denn eigentlich ist meine Muttersprache Deutsch. Originally my mother tongue is German. Et je parle français aussi. Yo hablo poquito español. Parlo even less Italiano. Dwi'n siarad Cymraeg hefyd, of course, I also speak Welsh. So there's lots of languages that I have played with, but actually when I was putting my notes together for you guys, I came to a much higher number of languages that I have studied and dropped. And this is one of those polyglot problems where we sometimes drop the languages we want to do, or that we, there's just not time for all of them in a busy life. So today, the languages I've studied, how I came to study them, some general conclusions of what that means for you, and where I see languages for me going in the future. Okay, let's start with when I first became interested, because I don't think I was born and my parents expected me to become this sort of language nerd child, but I have always loved communicating. I've always been curious about people, and my mum is this huge extrovert. She's this person who will, she asks anyone anything. It's just crazy, so that is, she'll talk to any stranger. If people think I'm outgoing, you have to meet my mother, because that is really, and that is one of my most formative people in my life, is just so outgoing. So I've always been curious about people, and I've always been curious and intrigued when I heard foreign languages. I have grown up in a German winemaking estate, so pretty much in the middle of a village on a farm in the 80s, and there were not that many foreign language speakers around. I certainly didn't really know any. I think my earliest contact with foreign languages is probably road trips to Luxembourg and France, which are countries that I've grown up really near. In the German Moselle Valley, you're only 50 miles away from Luxembourg, the border. So that's kind of what we did. But Luxembourg to me just meant that's the place where we go to the petrol station and there's chocolate for cheap. And I was sort of aware that, things were in different languages. And then I think the first signs were that I was always one of those kids that I loved reading. I read before school age. I was lucky because my dad taught me how to read sort of at home, and I picked it up quickly before he lost patience. And since I could read, I remember looking at cereal packets and kind of staring at them and being fascinated by the fact that when you get your cereal and you look at the side, you get this sort of breakdown. You know, you get the ingredients in Danish and German and French maybe, or if you're in the USA, you probably get them in Spanish, and maybe, you know, French for French Canadian readers, etc. So you sort of got this little, you always get this little array of languages, and I was just fascinated by that. I kept looking at like how the words all look the same, and how the word for sugar, it looks different in Swedish, and all that stuff. And this kind of comes in with, during my formative years, the European Union coming closer together and being this sort of, you know, like it made it very attractive to have other countries around, and the idea of being closer with other countries, I remember feeling like a really good thing. Of course, Germany reunited with its own country as well when I was a kid. So generally, just I grew up, I think, like many kids in my generation, yay, go us, you know, a sort of internationalist. And in kindergarten, until I was the age of 10, so I attended kindergarten from 6 till 10, there were no foreign languages at all taught formally. We did sing a few songs, so I often mention that there's this song that I sang in Hebrew when I was a kid, and there was also Shalom, hey ho, and we sang something in French, we sang something in English. We didn't learn, they didn't tell us what the words meant, they didn't really, there was nothing as such, it was just what we did. But I think the fascination for foreign languages was there before I ever had formal training. And I think this is why it's important to, these days, to introduce kids to the concept of other languages and other countries really early, because you need to be aware that there's more than just you in the world, which, especially in countries like Britain and the USA, very monolingual cultures, and perhaps China too, it can be difficult. So I think it's important to make children aware that there's other countries and people who speak other languages really early. I don't necessarily think we have to teach them grammar at age 7. I don't think anybody does. Let's just hope that they don't. So by the time I attended secondary school, I was kind of ready. I was like primed and could not wait to have my first English lesson. I remember how excited I was that English was on my curriculum now. And I remember the first word I learned was chair. Chair. And we drew a little picture of it, and I spelt it like the musician Cher. And that was like instant embarrassment, right? But that's just the way it goes. I learned English. English was a Hauptfach in the German school, which means it's one of the main core subjects. You can't drop anything really when you're 10 years old in my school, but that means you get 5 lessons a week. The lessons are 45 minutes, and it's just the grades you get are weighted more heavily. So, you know, it kind of counts as important as maths. That's what English was to us. That was 2 years, and then we were to add another core subject, and it had to be another language. Now, I had the choice between French and Latin in my school, and I didn't want to study Latin because it was a dead language. So this is what I knew, like, about life, you know, not much. So instead of studying Latin, I opted for French. And English had been this sort of plain sailing, clean success. I always loved learning English. Loved it. I didn't really even know how it all worked. English is one of those languages that you can pick up without really understanding much about it, without understanding too much about the grammar. So instead of that, instead of kind of understanding language more deeply, I just learned phrases and vocab and just studied it like any other subject. And similarly to maths, to be honest, where you just kind of do equations and you do what seems right in your head, and it just kind of comes together. And I think English is a language that lends itself to that. Tell you what isn't a language that lends itself to that? French, to me. So I started learning French when I was 13 years old, and I loved it just as much, you know, I had a good time. I didn't love the idea of going to France. I didn't love my teacher as much, and while I really adored learning liaisons and just getting a, you sort of, with French, most people know what the French accent sounds like. You can sort of do a comedy French, and to start understanding how the French comedy accent actually stems from how French people sound words out, French pronunciation. That was fascinating, but I didn't really connect with it as much. I really didn't like my teacher, and my grades tended to be in the B's and C's, so I was not like a French genius. I just kind of bumbled on with it, and it was, I had to. And the next language I added, I just kept adding. The next language I added was actually, I think, a reaction to French not being so much fun. So instead of thinking, I don't enjoy French, I'm not a language person, I had this boost of confidence from English. So English made me feel good about my abilities. French made me feel meh. And my reaction was to take on another language as soon as I could, which was Italian for me. So I started learning Italian in these sort of optional after-school classes, and we just hung around. The alternative was probably to go and work in a vineyard with my parents, and I wasn't keen. So instead I did Italian once an afternoon in school. It was a little bit of extra work, but Italian was amazing because we all know a little bit of Italian if we eat Italian food, and to just understand what all the pizza names mean, and it was just great. There was just enough Italian in my general culture to make me excited to speak Italian. And the pronunciation, again, this is a common theme with me, blew me away. It was so much fun. So by the age of 16, when most people finish school, I had studied 3 foreign languages, English, French and Italian, and it actually came time to end my Italian classes, and I have not ever had an Italian lesson since. But I kept Italian up quite well, and I understand it really well because of what happened next, which is that I started thinking about university, and I started thinking about what I might do with my life later on. And that was kind of the first time in my life that I started thinking, what do you do with languages? Like, what job do you do with languages? And the real thought was, well, I don't really know, but I know that I can study them at university, and I know that I can become a teacher if all else fails. That's how I always used to think about teaching in schools. Like, if all else fails, I can always become a teacher. And it actually was the case in Germany at the time, that you must have something called the Latinum if you want to become a teacher of foreign languages. So they sort of wanted us to evidence general linguistic ability, or sort of Romance language ability, which led to me picking up Latin as my next language. So at age 15, like every interesting person, I picked up Latin as a core subject because it was an intensive 3-year program, 5 lessons a week, 5 45-minute lessons plus homework in Latin, and I loved it. Latin made history make sense. Latin made all the boring subjects that I had, it made it all make sense. It just suddenly felt like something had come alive. And this is one of the things I love the most about languages. It just shows you that it creates life, right? It's another language, learning another language, diving into another language makes another country from a textbook instance into something real. And how did I get good at Latin? Well, sort of learning Latin required me to relearn German grammar. So when I first started learning Latin, our teacher made us take about 20 classes in German grammar. So the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks of Latin were just German, really, because the German grammar is so similar and useful for learning Latin because we're so systematic. So what we did was we just learned German grammar, which then informed my understanding of Latin grammar. And it was also that age, I think from the age of 14 upwards, I wanted a part-time job. I wanted to make money for myself, And the first obvious job when your parents are winemakers is you go and work in a vineyard. And I pretty much would have done anything to not work in a vineyard. And but I was too shy to go and work in a cafe either. And so it happened that I started kind of after school tutoring for other kids. And after school tutoring, you know, it's a very cheap way of getting your kid a bit of school boost, is to get other kids to tutor them. And the after school tutoring, not only did it make me money, but also every time I explained Latin to someone, every time I explained French to someone, and this is really, if you're a language learner right now struggling with grammar, try this because it works. Every time I explained it to someone, and I had to sort of get the book out and read it again in the book because I couldn't really explain it without knowing it. Every time I became a better linguist. So tutoring French made me so much better at French. Tutoring Latin made me so much better at Latin. And this is a theme that sort of persisted. And it also gave me more of a taste for teaching, you know. So that was sort of where I was at. Having left school, I left school with 4 foreign languages under my belt. And then the big question when you're leaving school and you've had such a good sort of language background, it was really cool, you can't really keep that up, right? Because learning 4 foreign languages is not really what you do for a living, unless your name is Alex Rawlings, I suppose. So I looked around, and luckily, because I'm from this sort of international place near European Union institutions and from Germany, I joined a group called ESA, and they're the European Schools for Higher Education in Administration and Management, which doesn't sound exciting, and really it's a secondary school and it's private. But the only reason I went to the school is because I got to learn English and French and German, I guess, at professional correspondence levels. So the focus was entirely on foreign languages, and not just those 3 in which I get I'm just kind of looking at this transcript. We did economics, we did a lot of translation. This is why I'm such a good writer in English and French, because I was graded incredibly strictly on translation, and we did translation into the first language and into the foreign language consistently and regularly. We did many summaries of news articles, we discussed politics. This was high level, and it made me the best French speaker I'd ever been, the best English speaker I'd ever been. This is the first time in my life I learned from native speakers. And I also had Spanish, but in Spanish we were only really tested on our oral communication. And if you have ever studied Spanish and you felt like just, you know, widening and improving your speaking skill, you might know that in Spanish it's very easy to pick up spoken skills if you have a background in English or French or Italian, you know, or Latin. So it didn't seem that challenging, but again, helped me boost my confidence. So this was my formal education, after which I'm just going to skip a few years because it's boring. But what happened after I finished secondary school is that I'll tell you about French, because I think this is relevant to the language habit and everything that sort of has something to do with this, is that I really wanted to keep French under my belt. But suddenly I was at this cliff edge of formal education. And at the cliff edge of formal education, after that, you have to become a self-teacher, or you have to kind of search for it. So I had managed to keep French into my degree. That was a fight, and I had to write to universities to beg them to let me take French. They allowed it eventually. I lost Spanish, and I didn't really learn any new languages until I finished my master's in translation studies, which was not... With languages you can go this way and learn more languages, or you can do this, which is going really deep in a specific field in languages. And I feel like that the first time I did that was when I did my master's in translation studies. I didn't add 6 new languages polyglot style. I went really deep, linguist style. And this is also when I picked up this amazing book that I really wanted to share with you. As always, I'll put the link in the description later. This is my first sort of touch of linguistics. It's called Introducing Linguistics, and it's a very interesting, nice, graphically designed way of introducing you to pretty much everything to do with linguistics. So not just language acquisition, but the phonetics, semantics, pragmatics, writing systems, you know, how everything pretty much. So this, highly recommended, Introducing Linguistics. So after this, I sort of, you know, I was in this deep space, and my curiosity for other languages was still there. So I kind of, after my MA, really felt that I wanted to kind of come back up and realize that I'm not really I worked as a translator for a while, but it's not my dream job. It's, again, back to what do you do with a language? You just try until you find what you love. And what I love is doing this, talking to you on the internet, helping you learn better. But at the time I was a translator, and then I came out and I took a job as an international officer in the universities, which was great because I worked for the university I used to work for. And this is when I took this certificate. It's called Advanced +2 French, and my university, the University of Central Lancashire, and this is all very, don't steal my identity, allowed me to take this, and it was the 3rd year module from my degree in French. So again, what I did, and this is so important for understanding how long it takes, how much work has to be put into learning and maintaining a language fluently. I hadn't spoken French for about 1.5 years, and when I went into employment, the first sort of routine came back into my life, etc., and I was ready to come out of the depth linguist side and look around at new foreign languages. The first language I looked at, and I do this again and again and again now even, was French, my second foreign language, because French I knew at such a high level, I didn't want that level to drop. So the first thing I did was kind of come back and retake my university level in French, instead of, because I wanted to be conversational, I wanted to stay at this sort of C1, C2 level that I was at. C2 is overstating it, C1 I would say. And I didn't want to add a new language. However, I did double in Polish. So I took a few Polish classes, but never really persisted with it because the classes ended. Again, I was a bad self-teacher at the time. Being a bad self-teacher means that when your class ends, you're lost. When your teacher goes away, you're lost. And this is why I think self-teaching is so, so important. So I was kind of at this dabbling stage, and I stuck with what I knew well, and I was, fluent in 3 languages at the time. However, I was not a good self-teacher, not a good independent learner of languages. And this is where I started to learn, and this is 10 years ago now, I started to learn the skills that I help students with today, that I coach you guys in, the skills that are really involved in the Language Habit Toolkit. And this is why I think the Language Habit Toolkit is sort of the culmination of so much that I've made, and I'm so excited to have it out there. So I slowly started picking up languages again, and this is kind of fast forward to now. So at the time I exited formal education and became a self-teacher, I had learned English, French, Italian, Latin and Spanish, which is 5 foreign languages. And since then I sort of dabbled in Polish, didn't really go anywhere. Since then I have learned 2 extra foreign languages to a level that I consider was quite respectable. My first one was Russian, and I learned it with this book, which I can highly recommend. It was, again, if there's pictures, I'm down, right? This is what the Russian in 10 Minutes a Day book looks like. It's great if you are kind of new, or like I was, new to self-teaching, new to coming back, because it's built on this 10 minutes a day concept, which again, Language Habit Toolkit is based on this, like, as well. It's like my belief is You don't really need a lot more to get going. And you just start small. And what this did, because there was so much writing in it as well, it comes with CDs, so you get a bit of listening practice. It comes with all these awesome stickers that you can put all over your house. It comes with pre-built flashcards. So these books are great because they're really fun. You know, they're cute. They're not particularly taxing. They make you write, which I think is extremely important. And they come with so many different options of how to learn that they help you get into self-teaching very easily. And that is, these books are available in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think 15 languages overall, but 12 at the time of publishing. And again, link will be in your description. Love them, love them. If you're in the UK, I know the supplier, so if you want me to get one for you and post it, just leave a message on this video and I will do it, no problem. Okay, so that was Russian. And Russian, if you're listening to the Creative Language Learning podcast, you'll know that at the time of starting that podcast, so at the time of starting Fluent, I was still doing Russian. And I didn't pick up a new sort of language because, again, I kind of went deeper into linguistics as I became a private German tutor and an online teacher, because I had to learn this whole new way of helping other people learn. I had to get better at teaching German. I had to get better at teaching because now I was a full-time teacher and I wanted to understand how people learn languages. And that's really where I started accumulating all this knowledge of independent language learning, how other people do it. I knew how I did it. I had developed my own routine in doing it. But I needed to find out more about other people. And just one book that I want to recommend from those days, I know this video is long, so I'm going to be quick now, is this German grammar book. Best German grammar book. Do this or take my German grammar course, which they're similar, simple explanations. If you're an English speaker who needs English to understand German grammar, take my course. If you're a German speaker who wants a Nachschlagewerk, so some, for looking it up, please take this. It's so good. It's so good. Okay, so that was really when I started. I started writing Fluent. I became a language learning writer. I wrote things like this. And I just tutored people, so I became a better tutor. And Welsh kept making eyes at me, so at some point I kind of made the switch from Russian, which was a language I loved because I traveled to Kazakhstan and Russia a lot in the olden days. I made the switch from Russian to Welsh, and really that's where I am now. So you can see that as I learned how to self-teach, I'm just checking my notes in case I forgot something, but no, here we are. It's my birthday next week, so I'm 34 next week, and I have been learning languages for 24 years now, and I love it, love it, love it. And sometimes you go like that, where you take on more languages, and sometimes you just go into depth and you learn about language learning, and both of those are legit, both of those are important. And I think this is why languages and polyglotism are a tricky thing, because many times like a polyglot isn't a linguist and a linguist isn't a polyglot, but they sort of, because to me at least, a polyglot is a lover of language who likes breadth, and a linguist is a lover of language who loves depth. However, you can be the same thing, and I'm sort of I'm like a language ball who likes both. And something I really feel so passionate about is the self-teaching of language, because I have experienced what happens when you're off the cliff edge of formal education and it's not fun, because you just don't know what to do. You're way better to develop your own skills. And please, if you are interested, and I apologize for the lorry going past, or the truck, you call them in America. It's if you're in any way interested, please do check out the Language Habit Toolkit. There's so much work in it, and it really is the best way I know to self-teach a language. So yes, I'm so excited. If you've already bought it, please comment and tell me how you like it, because thank you, yay. Okay, so Clayton, hi. Thank you for watching. Why am I so interested in Welsh? That's your question. It's started with going on holiday with my husband to, we went down to maybe Cardiff. My friend Sarah moved to Cardiff from Lancaster, where I live, and we went to visit her at some point. And then we went to a place called Pembrokeshire, which is just really beautiful. So we just went on a summer trip to Wales, driving trip, road trip, and I downloaded this podcast, just a few bits of the podcast, and I saw all the bilingual signs in Wales, and it was just two things really. Number one, suddenly in my own country where I live, in my crazy monolingual world, England is so monolingual, I had gone 2 hours out of my place and suddenly the world was bilingual, the signs were bilingual. It was just, it felt so good. It felt so good to me because I was so interested in language, and I was just like, oh, they've got this hidden bit. I'm so fascinated. So that was great. And the second point was just that the sounds of the language are unusual to somebody like me whose background is Germanic and Romance languages. And that started really what fascinated me. As I have gone on, and like I wrote in the Language Habit, if you've got the toolkit, I talked a little bit about it in the handbook. But as I kind of went on, what interested me next was really kind of being able to pronounce these crazy words that I was seeing. Then what interested me next was just, like once I make a commitment to a language, I'm a little bit, mono relationship there. Once I make a commitment, I stick with it. What interested me next was just seeing how far can I get in this course. And I kind of expected it to become boring at some point. As I did with Fluent, actually. I expected myself to, people did as well. People expected me to run out of things to talk about, and here I am 5 years later still talking. And I'm the same with Welsh. I kind of like going deep into my languages. I love deep diving into it at some point. The thing that keeps me going with Welsh, which is maybe the question you're asking me about now, is that I can see my progress. Again, I talk about the Language Habit Toolkit because I think it's so important to know your progress, to know how far you're going. And I can see my progress, and I can see that I'm getting somewhere. So I don't want to give up now. And also, as I learned more about the Welsh country in particular, I think this story of revival is amazing. In 2011, under 2% of the British population knew Welsh. That is a number that has to go up if this language is to not die. I have never personally studied a language that is so threatened by language death before. And I'm so proud to be part of that sort of language revival and to be spreading the message. So Welsh is incredibly interesting because not only is it ancient and sounds cool, but it also adds something to my own knowledge and understanding of what language can mean to people, their identity and their place in the world that I have never known before. I've never been kind of, I've never understood before. And that's why I'm so interested in Welsh. I'm also interested in, here is my list, I'm particularly interested in Luxembourg. Oh yeah, here's my first Welsh book, which I bought in like a tourist shop. And it's not very good. I'm so sorry, Haney Griffith. But I don't think this is organized very well. It's more like a phrase book. And I did try to speak Welsh from this phrase book. And yeah, nobody was a Welsh speaker who could reply to me. So, another reason I'm learning Welsh is because I want everybody to learn Welsh. Here is one of my languages on my list, Luxembourgish. Another language I'd really love to learn is Indonesian and Malaysian, because it's fascinating and cool. And I feel that I have a big deficit right now in Asian languages. So East Asian languages, particularly those scripts. The only foreign, non-Roman script I have ever studied is Russian, the Cyrillic script, and I think there is room for improvement in my knowledge of Far East Asian languages. So something like Japanese and Chinese I will pick up eventually, but like I said, I'm not here to add 20 languages to my portfolio and sort of race to expertise with them very quickly. My way of studying is really to kind of go deep in any one so that I have a real solid grounding, and I feel like that is what I still have in Russian, even though I'm not studying Russian anymore. Okay, and this really leaves me with the end of my story. So as of now, I would say I fluently speak English, French and German. I would say that I have an A2 level in Spanish, and a sort of A1 level in Italian, although I understand a lot more than I can say. So that really brings me down. My listening skill is way higher. My reading skill is probably at the start of a B, if not even higher, because I can speak in read in past and future. I would say I'm sort of around A1 in Russian, but all I ever wanted was to understand Cyrillic and get the gist, so I'm cool with that. Like, I opted out before cases came in. And and I would say that I am in the A2s, moving towards B1 level, hopefully end of this year in Welsh. But there's no rush, and I have so many more languages to learn. What I can say confidently, and what I think is way more important, is that I am never going to stop learning languages as long as I live. And I'm really proud of that, and that is what I want for you. That's what would make me incredibly excited. And really, that is the end of my story. Hey Rasmus, thank you for checking in. You know, late better than never. I'm glad you joined in. It's been a long story with a few recommendations, and hopefully you find this interesting. Hopefully I gave you a perspective of language learning, how I do it, and particularly why it's so important to me, and why I developed the Language Habit Toolkit, which I'm so proud to again mention to you. I will do more promo for it in the coming weeks, you know, once I've got my eggs in the basket. No, ducks in a row, that's what you do, not your eggs. Easter. If you're interested, go to fluentlanguage.co.uk/the-language-habit-toolkit, and that's where you get all the information you need. And I'm also going to drop that link down there, as well as the link to books about linguistics, Russian and German grammar. Bye guys!